All right, go ahead and roll for perception.
I got a 13.
Hey, that's pretty good. With that, you can tell there's some fantasy situations going on. You hear some adult language, and with that, you can tell this podcast probably isn't for kids.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Dungeoncast. I'm Will.
And I'm Brian.
This is the podcast where we talk about everything Dungeons and Dragons, from Titanic Tarrasques to timid tinkers. And today, we're talking about Tieflings.
Prepare yourselves.
I cast Fireball. The Dungeoncast.
Let's jump in.
Let's do it. Tieflings.
Tell me about them.
Tieflings are...
What makes a man a tiefling?
There are quite a few things that can make a man a tiefling in the world of Dungeons and Dragons. Tieflings are an interesting race. They are one of the most exotic races in the Player's Handbook. And the fact that they're in the Player's Handbook is actually...
it's a point of controversy,
yeah,
right?
It's a point of controversy to a certain extent.
Community.
This isn't the first time that they've been in the Player's Handbook. It's not the first edition they've been in the Player's Handbook. It's the second. But it's still not considered like a common race or...
It's not widely accepted either.
It's not a widely accepted race, yeah. Now, I love the Tiefling. It's actually one of my... I was going over it in my head the other day, and I was like, okay, top 5 favorite races, and they were like number 3, I think. I think number 1 was half-elves, and number 2 was humans, actually, and then it was Tieflings. Also, I like elves, and then dwarves. But Tieflings are a very scary-looking race. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Tieflings are usually humanoids or human-looking people with very devilish or demonic features, like very prominent demonic or devilish features, to the point where if you saw one walking around... your most common tiefling, it just looks evil. It looks fiendish.
We're talking like red tones and like horns
and sharp teeth,
tails with like spaded points at the end and things of that nature.
Eyes without pupils that are just one solid color. Now,
you know that tattoo you saw on that guy's arm of that like devil lady?
Yeah. Tieflings look a lot like that. Well, now they do. They didn't always.
Okay.
And so we're going to start at the beginning of the history of Tieflings, because Tieflings, the way they start out, are very different from what you're used to. Because you've played now, you've DM'd for one Tiefling, and you've been a player with a Tiefling in your party.
Yeah.
But both of those are like the more modern iteration of Tieflings, and that is a second point of controversy when it comes to Tieflings. Like, there's a group of people that don't think Tieflings should be in any of the core books as playable races.
Yeah, they're like encounterable things.
Right.
NPCs.
And then there's groups of people that do like Tieflings, but some of them like the old way Tieflings were and hate the new way. And some people like the new way and don't care for the old way.
Can we start from the ground up?
We're going to start from the ground up.
Sweet. Can you take me back in time to a time when I didn't roll dice?
Right, okay.
Well, not like that.
Yeah, got you. Tiefling started in a campaign setting known as the Planescape campaign setting. Now, I only know so much about this campaign setting. I've never really played in Planescape. I know a lot of the basic stuff, like in Planescape, it exists in a campaign setting where planar travel is much, much more common than like what you're probably used to or what vanilla D&D usually like entails.
Okay.
Like, and because of that, interplanar beings are very prominent in the lore. And in the case of Tieflings, fiends are very prominent in Planescape lore. Fiends are things like demons, which are from the Abyss, or devils, which are from the Nine Hells traditionally. There are also other types of fiends, but we're not really going to talk about those because they don't really come into play when we're talking about Tieflings.
Yeah, they're not necessarily associated in that manner.
Yeah. In the original setting of Planescape, where Tieflings arose... if you were a Tiefling, what it meant was that at some point in your ancestry, someone interbreeded with a fiend of some sort. A Tiefling isn't to be confused with like a half fiend or like a half demon or half devil. Those are different creatures.
Okay.
But at some point, fiendish blood got into the bloodline, and it sporadically, randomly shows itself. Like, you might be a Tiefling born from like nothing but humans for the last 5 generations, and it just showed up.
That's similar to like Dragonborn in a way, I guess. and kind of how like they're integrated from like a dragon basically.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
Like,
they do have that similarity.
Reminds me of like Fey stuff too.
Yeah.
There's like Fey blood in creatures that are playable.
Very much so. That's absolutely true. It's actually funny that you bring up Dragonborn because it's similar to Dragonborn, but it's actually in reverse. It used to be with Dragonborn that they weren't born of dragons. Dragons created them.
Right.
And nowadays it's more they're literal biological descendants. And Tieflings started off as biological descendants, and now they're something kind of different, but we'll get there.
Okay.
So the way that these Tieflings would show their heritage was really random. There was no uniformity to being a Tiefling, because it all depended on like what your ancestor was. Like, were they a demon or were they a devil? Because those are very different things, and there's different kinds of each of those.
I know to the common person that probably doesn't like, you can't like really separate the two.
Right.
Like I have a little trouble, but like I've seen enough.
Right. Yeah.
I know now that they are different.
They're very different, and I actually look forward to those episodes because there's a lot of rich lore there to talk about. But it would be random, usually horrific type things that would.
Tieflings are generally scary looking.
Yeah, and so like these old school Tieflings, like some of them would just have random extra fingers or like cloven hooves.
Gross.
Like everything would be normal, but their legs and feet would be like cloven goat
Hillbilly
legs.
Tieflings with snaggle fingers.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I feel like Tieflings
caught
back
on
in the day
you
used to
and
be
they
really
hug you.
gross looking, like really like just horrific.
Kind of mutant-esque.
Kind of mutant-esque. Yeah, exactly. That's a strange colored eye, stuff like that. Another thing that Tieflings still have to this day, although I don't really usually see it like expressed in in-game terms, is usually a Tiefling will have like one or two types of auras about themselves, like either an aura of evil.
Are you talking about like a physical glow?
No,
Like
I
a
just mean
visual
like
thing?
a feeling, like when a
Like they're putting
Tiefling
off a vibe and
exactly an energy or vibe, and like Tieflings were said to give off a vibe that made you feel inherently very uncomfortable. You would feel evil in the room.
Well, D'Artagnan makes me uncomfortable.
Well, D'Artagnan makes everyone uncomfortable. But and that or it would be almost the opposite, where they would give off a very seductive or alluring vibe, and that's because succubi and incubi are very prominent fiends, and they used to be. I think they used to be like neutral fiends, like they were neither devil nor demon, and then they became more inherently like devilish, and now they're kind of back to being kind of devilish, but also they could technically be between the two. But that's neither here nor there. So these original Tieflings were like basically biological mutants because of demonic or devilish contamination of bloodlines.
yeah, they're radioactive.
Yeah, they're radioactive
gonna say
freaks, if
that.
you will.
I'm not going to say what I was going to say.
Oh, okay. What were you? Okay, we'll talk about it after
It'll
the show.
violate some kind of.
Okay,
yeah.
I gotcha. All right, well, moving on. We're gonna move on to more modern
Seed.
Tieflings. Gotcha. Okay, that's gross.
It is gross.
Moving
Continue.
on. So in 4th edition, I don't know what possessed Wizards of the Coast to do this. I don't know where the inspiration to do this came from. I'm glad they did it because I like modern Tieflings a lot, but they're very, very different.
If you're out there and you know, tweet at us.
Yeah, I'd like to know. I tried to do a little bit of research. I'm not going to say I scoured the web and looked everywhere. I didn't, but
I went into the depths of the internet,
I Googled,
the darkest corners.
I Googled like 2 things and nothing came up, and so I moved on. But in 4th edition, they changed everything. And number 1, Tieflings made their way into the player's handbook, which was a bizarre choice, but I thought it was pretty cool. But number 2, they were completely different from what we were kind of exposed to before. They became strictly devilish. They had nothing to do with demons, and they were much more uniform. So Tieflings usually had some sort of reddish to grayish tone of skin.
Oh, as opposed to having all these kind of weird random
Exactly.
like differentiations.
They all had horns. The horns could be different from each other, but they all had horns on their foreheads.
Yeah.
Some would be real small, some would be big, some would be curved, some would be
Like
straight.
other facial traits would be, or facial traits would be. Like ears, how some people have like earlobes that are attached to their.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. Like how anyone else's facial structures would be.
Yeah.
They all had tails, and their tails were like I would say borderline reptilian like. Like they're not scaled, but like they're like thick, fleshy tails. They're not
Like slither like a
prehensile
snake.
or
I've
anything.
seen them kind of like in art, like wave a lot.
Yeah, they move and they wave a lot. It's
Yeah.
actually said that when a tiefling is really upset, their tail will quiver a lot. Again, that doesn't really get talked about in game. I mean, maybe it does, not in my games, but
My tail quivers.
yeah, when I'm just so mad. But they all have like sharp teeth, and they all look very devilish. And by devilish, I mean they look like Asmodeus, Lord of the Nine Hells, who is based off the Judeo-Christian Satan. And so they look
Diablo.
they look very El Diablo. And their origin story changed. So it no longer became about the fact that like fiends interbreeded with mortals and thus tieflings came about. It actually has ties to old 4th edition lore, where supposedly there was an old empire called Baal Turath, which was a very prominent empire and the rival to the Dragonborn Empire of Arcosia. And they were, at war much of the time, and they're very much rivals.
Okay.
And the aristocrats and nobles of Baal Turath were known to be very power hungry, very ambitious, very cunning and conniving, and a little bit ruthless. And word of Baal Turath made its way to the Nine Hells and made its way to Asmodeus, and the devils decided to haunt these aristocrats with dreams of power and grandeur and whatnot, and plans to a horrid ritual, which it doesn't get into details on, but the ritual supposedly took a month to perform and involved the mass slaughtering of a lot of people and a lot of horrific things.
That reminds me of Full Metal Alchemist.
Oh yeah, very
in
much so.
Brotherhood, yeah.
And when all was said and done, the aristocrats were given infernal powers, much like the Lords of the Nine Hells, but they were also transformed into what we know as tieflings, with the reddish skin.
You're gonna look like me.
They were cursed to appear as devils.
Yeah.
And they were given some inherent powers, because like tieflings do have some inherent infernal legacy. It gives them some like fire powers and darkness powers and stuff like that, and a resistance to fire and like an inherent boost to their charisma and intelligence. But they're also cursed to look what some people would call horrific. And it wasn't too long after that Baal Turath fell apart, because commoners aren't going to want to be ruled by monsters, and and that's just how it goes. That's how the cookie crumbles, and Baal Turath fell to ruin. Now here's the thing: in 4th edition D&D, and I think this is all current with 5th edition D&D as far as I know, because I was reading through the player's handbook and it pretty much matched up. But tieflings breed true, which is to say that if a tiefling and a human have a baby, the baby's going to be a tiefling.
That's interesting.
If an elf and a tiefling have a baby, the baby's going to be a
So they've
tiefling.
squashed the half tiefling thing.
Yeah, there is no half tiefling. The blood does not dilute. Tieflings breed true. It's
like,
just the
"You
way it
gonna
is.
keep looking like
the
me."
curse is strong, and Asmodeus is powerful.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the current lore on tieflings, and I happen to like it a lot. But
It's
it's
a good
very
ass
different.
blood ritual.
Yeah, it was a
gonna
very
be
powerful blood
be
ritual.
passed down.
Yeah.
For lines and lines.
And I would imagine as long as Asmodeus is in charge of the Nine Hells and is powerful, the curse will hold true. Like, why
Right.
wouldn't he? He's a god. So, moving on to actually like role playing a tiefling. So tieflings have this rich lore, this almost like tragic lore of like an inner darkness or like a past that continues to haunt them to this day. And it's very common in most D&D games that tieflings are treated very poorly. I mean, they look like monsters.
Yeah, there's going to be some inherent fear in a lot of like places that aren't used to travelers.
Yeah, depending on your setting, like, I mean, I would argue that, like, in a Planescape type setting or a setting that's high magic that sees all kinds of creatures, most people might not even bat an eyelash at tieflings.
Yeah, that's true.
Because, like, in the player's handbook, it says this, like, tieflings are not inherently evil. Their bloodline's just cursed to look that way. Like, they may have some, like, tendencies, or it might be a little bit easier for them to, like, embrace the ways of darkness because of their, like, bloodline.
I definitely get that. With my two experiences with tieflings,
right? Yeah,
mostly because there's like a lot of self-serving things going on, and that always borders on like evil.
And tieflings are very self-serving naturally because of the way the world treats them. Also because of like the devilish characteristics that they uptook, making them very charismatic. because devils are very charismatic.
Yeah, persuasive.
They're very persuasive, very good at intimidating, very deceptive. But because they're so ostracized, they are forced to become self-reliant or die because they have no home, they have no nation. Like most religions don't want them. Like most of the world doesn't want these people. So you kind of get two types of tiefling tropes. You get the kind that like to reject the world's view of them and reject their bloodline and try and overcome it. And those that say, you know what?
I am what I am,
and they embrace their evil and they dive right into it. And you get all these, tiefling rogues and warlocks and like those that walk the darker paths, if you will,
tend to want to gain power to get a better foothold, fight the world.
Yeah, and I think that's common in real life. A lot of times if you treat people badly or like people that get bullied really hard, some people retaliate, and it's not to be not expected because
I wish
all these people are
D&D
people.
and life would mirror each other a little harder in that regard, so that like you could just become an adventurer.
Oh, I know, that'd be awesome. Screw it, I'm hitting the road. I'm gonna go find some loot.
I'm
And
gonna get on a
dope ass
train.
warlock.
Just regular hobos, not murder hobos.
Yeah, there would be murder hobos. I do guarantee that. So, like I said, tieflings are traditionally very scattered, and they usually don't have too strong a sense of security. Tieflings are very suspicious because they are so distrusted and they are treated so poorly that they distrust everyone around them.
Yeah.
Including each other.
It's like the nature of what goes on
Yeah, exactly.
in their lives.
So they're marked by these lives of suspicion and distrust and loneliness, and they have a tendency to be a very dark and brooding type race, which I know a lot of people get annoyed by. And like I'm not the biggest fan of that trope either, but like and I've run quite a few tieflings, and I don't run tieflings that way, as you've seen. Like D'Artagnan does not brood.
He's very bold.
He's very bold.
But he's
and
also from a place of like nobility.
Exactly.
Which is another thing with the other tiefling that we know, Thanik.
He is
He's
actually
also a place of nobility.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. For me, the reason that I went with the whole nobility thing is I like the idea that these tieflings descended from nobles. They descended from these aristocrats, and they descended from this like really powerful empire.
Yeah,
like,
that doesn't just go away just because you look like Satan.
It scatters right.
That might actually help you.
Yeah, well, I mean, it scattered. Okay, so they scatter to the wind. Everything falls apart. The world distrusts them. And on one hand, a lot of times when people get ostracized like that, they become like these self-reliant people that like don't trust anybody and kind of have to make out their life alone in the world. But another thing that happens naturally, I would imagine, is people come together to form a community where they are accepted. And if you get enough tieflings together, they're going to want to run a town, run a city, run a nation.
All of a sudden they have a government and there's power involved, and somebody's going to climb to the top.
And some people are going to remember the empire they once had. And so for me, D'Artagnan and the place he's from and all that, that's what that is. They're rebuilding Baal Turath.
Yeah, basically, you guys are doing a pretty good job at it.
I would say so. Thank you very much. So
that's in the lore of my game.
So oftentimes, though, in vanilla D&D, that's not the case, and tieflings are meant to be these wandering people that are constantly trying to find a home in life, and they're constantly at conflict with their heritage. Infernal, to be or not to be, you know what I mean? Like, and that could be a fun thing to explore.
It might make you tired if you think about it too much. I'm thinking about it too much.
Yeah?
I think I'm going to need to rest.
Well, let's take a rest. Okay. All right.
Hey everybody, you have made it to the part of the episode where we take a break and we say thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening and supporting us. We really appreciate it. And we really appreciate everybody who's getting out there on Twitter, everybody's getting out there into those YouTube comments, rolling deep into the iTunes, giving us ratings. It's been great seeing all that. So once again, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. And I wanted to say that around the time that this episode drops, actually probably a few days before this episode drops, we will be announcing the winners to our contest that is ongoing right now.
Oh, yeah.
Because we do record these episodes ahead of time, like quite a few weeks ahead of time. So
yeah, or at least we try.
Or at least we try. So by the time this podcast drops, we will have announced 2 winners for books.
Count 'em,
that,
2.
Yeah, books that we have given away for the newest D&D book,
Tales of the Yawning Portal.
And if you want to check out who's won those contests, go to our Twitter at the Dungeoncast and check it out.
Yeah, Will's been putting on these contests for us for a little bit, so thank you, Will.
Yeah, they've been fun.
And you've been making some people happy with some good clean books.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
Yeah, real
and,
cool.
I would say that we will eventually do a shout out to the winners. It's just it might be a few episodes because again we do record things ahead of time.
Yeah, so we will shout you out eventually, and congratulations to the both of you. And obviously, you will be talked about on our Twitter feed. So keep an eye out for that. You will be notified, and you will have a book shipped to you.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully shipping to you.
Mm-hmm. And like Brian said, congratulations to the 2 of you, but also thank you to everyone else who did enter the contest because it helped us tremendously. You know, you tweet out about the show and let your followers know, that we're here and that we're a good resource, and it brings up our views, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah,
so thank
getting
you,
us
all
that
of you.
visibility and that traction, it means a lot. So thanks for everybody who participated. We shouted a lot of you guys out, I think, in the last episode.
I think
and
we
the one before
shouted
that.
a good chunk of people, but again, we record these ahead of time, so there's a whole other chunk of people that didn't get to be shouted out. So I'm sorry about
we'll probably
that.
be doing more shout outs in regards to that in the future, because
Yeah,
I think
I like
if you
that.
tweeted out a link to the show, you at least deserve a shout out.
Heck yeah, absolutely. And
So catch us next time.
Yeah, and also keep your ears out for more contests because I'm sure I'll probably run another one sometime in the future. So.
Yeah, you can find our podcast on soundcloud.com/thedungeoncast or anywhere you get your podcasts, including iTunes. You can find us on YouTube. Just search The Dungeoncast. Our Twitter handle is @thedungeoncast. You can Gmail us, thedungeoncast@gmail.com. And I think that's it. Rest feels good, and I like rest, and rolling hit die is nice, but that's all over now. So maybe we should get back to it.
Back to the show.
Back to the show. We have, actually.
Okay. All right. You feel all rested up?
Yeah, I'm rested, and
Okay.
our device is rested, and now they're active once more.
They are currently.
Are you
on.
listening out there, audience?
Please, I hope you are. Okay, so during the short rest, you actually asked me about going a little bit more over the appearances of tieflings.
Yeah, I want to know
and-
what the variations are, because I know that as far as building your character and the role play, and you should discuss it with your DM, what your DM thinks
Right.
tieflings look like, but how far do we get here? Because I know in the player's handbook I normally see a lot of black and red.
Yes. Okay. I'm actually glad you brought it up because we glossed over it. We touched very much on it before the break, but I left some parts out that I just forgot to bring up. So number 1, you're right. Totally at DM's discretion, obviously. Number 2 is where I had left it off on was in 4th edition, they made tieflings much more uniform looking with the reddish skin and the sharp teeth and the horns and the tails and all that stuff. All infernal as well.
Like a race.
Like a race would be. But when it comes to their skin tone, since 2nd edition or since 4th edition, it has changed a bit, and I actually really like this change. And tieflings can now have a wide range of skin tones.
Okay.
And this is to reflect, I think. For instance, succubi can look incredibly human.
Yeah.
And it will have
Makes
some
sense.
devilish features, but they don't usually have the reddish skin and stuff like that. So because of that, tieflings can range anywhere from normal human tones all the way gray, black, purple, red. I've seen some iterations of blue. I think that's rare, and I don't think that's really canon to vanilla D&D, but fuck it, it's your game. I think the tiefling in the game that I'm DMing for you guys, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I believe that Nick's tiefling Thanik is very exotic looking with
Yeah, he's got gold tones.
golden hair and obsidian skin, and I mean, that's cool. I'm down with that. Why not?
Sick, yeah.
Maybe there's an archduke that totally looks like
I was
that.
thinking about some I don't know what I'm thinking of exactly. Maybe Darth Maul with lines in of highlights, almost like a cutout. If you cut skin out and there's green, your sweet Bulbasaur hat.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I like that idea. That isn't canon. That's not something I've seen done. It's something I'd accept if that's what if that's important to the player, if that's how they want their guy to look. Just much like when Nick said like, oh, I want my guy to have like hair that's golden.
Yeah.
Like, and he said golden, not blonde. Like it's golden, and then like obsidian skin, and I think his eyes are golden too. Like I'm like, that sounds cool.
And his
Hell
horns,
yeah.
I think. It's been a little while.
Yeah, it's been a while since I asked for his character description, but yeah, like I'm down with that. That doesn't really change anything for me, and like it's your character, so the vibe and the look of your character is important to you.
Yeah,
and I kind of give the players their own agency when it comes to that.
Art.
Yes, and For the old school players though that like the old way of doing tieflings, which
that's like the mutations. And things like that.
And that's not my way, but I mean I think it's a totally legit and awesome way. And they gave those options, I believe, in the Sword Coast Adventurer Guide, where you literally have those options, and there's even some like what's the word I'm looking for? Not a sub-race option, but like alternative options to some of the mechanical things that tieflings get, which we're about to dive into right now.
Like a variant?
Like variant, that's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, there's a literal tiefling variant.
Neat,
and,
okay.
Optional stuff, like not just for like the stats, like the stat attributes, but actual like straight up features where like it replaces some of the spells on your infernal magic feature.
Oh, wow.
Or like
That's
it'll
really
give you
in-depth.
wings in exchange for any of your magic stuff, and it's stuff like that. It's
Wings?
pretty cool.
Are we talking higher levels stuff here?
No, you just fucking get wings.
Like angel wings, like usable flying
Like
wings.
usable flying wings. I mean, the Aarakocra get them.
Oh,
you
well,
know?
yeah, that's true,
Yeah,
but
so
People tend to avoid that. I think
Yeah.
flying races.
I think wings is where I would draw the line as a DM. Like I'm
It's a
not
little
going
hard
to
to
give my
manage.
tieflings wings. No, not just because they're very powerful, but also it's just because that's just not the norm for tieflings. Like
That's
if
not
they
your
really
lore in
want
your
it,
game.
we'll work something out. But like I'm not looking forward to that. But okay, so moving on. So let's get into the actual mechanics of if you're running a tiefling and some of the cool things you get. Tieflings are known for their charisma and their guile, and as such, they get a +2 to charisma and a +1 to intelligence.
Cool,
They're
yeah.
very cunning, self-reliant, and persuasive race. On top of that, they get dark vision. Why? Because, well, devils have dark vision, and that passes on to them. Also, so does everything fucking else in this game.
Yeah,
So-
if you're anything but a human, pretty much you get dark vision.
Exactly. It's crazy. But, I mean, that's cool. Whatever.
But humans are dope.
Humans are awesome. Humans are actually one of my favorite races to run, and I would love to do an episode on humans, and we will one day.
The human variant is
Mm-hmm.
super, super duper good.
Yes, very good.
Jesus, stat boost.
Yeah, and humans in 4th edition were also very good. Tieflings also get an innate resistance to fire. So all fire does half damage to tieflings.
Oh yeah, we had some fun with that.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
He took a hot bath and it was so hot that I was gonna make him take a D4 of damage. And
I was ready for it.
he was like, "Oh no, I resist fire."
Yeah.
So I
And-
was like, "Oh no, then your bath is just how you like it."
Exactly. And he loves his baths scalding hot. So another thing that tieflings have is they have inherited inheritable infernal magic. So I believe at level 1 they get the cantrip called thaumaturgy, which is a really cool cantrip. It's probably my favorite
Nifty.
cantrip. It is. A lot of people like to call it like the cleric's prestidigitation.
Yes.
And like
Yeah.
in a lot of ways it is, but it's also very different than prestidigitation. It's really cool. It's like so
Affect the sensory.
an actual example I can give of like thaumaturgy being cast in like a major motion picture is in Fellowship of the Ring
Mm-hmm.
when Gandalf is like, "Don't tempt me, Frodo," and like he kind of like it's almost like he gets big and the shadows start to like groan and like his voice booms. That's thaumaturgy, and that's what
Cool.
thaumaturgy does. It can make your voice boom or your eyes glow or like shadows kind of flicker or like window shutters open and shut. It's like
persuasion check assist.
yeah, exactly.
intimidation
and that's very
check
much what I
assist.
use it for, and I see it used for is stuff exactly like that.
Yeah, make your eyes glow and stuff like that. It was really cool.
Exactly. So tieflings inherently get that ability at any level. At level 3, they get the ability to cast the darkness spell, which I believe you guys have a lot of experience with.
Oh yeah, that was
because
cool.
That spell gets cast a lot in your
It's
party.
stupid when two go off in the same battle
Yes,
and they're
it's
intersecting.
It's ridiculous. And then actually no, they don't get darkness till level 5. At level 3, they get a spell called Hellish Rebuke. Which,
I'm familiar.
Yes, which you are, but Hellish Rebuke is
really
a cool
cool.
spell where You can use it as a reaction if you get hit by an attack. You can use your reaction to cast Hellish Rebuke, and it causes fire damage. I think it's a D10 of fire damage to the person who hit you. And
Just rebuke hellishly.
yeah, exactly. Exactly so. And the variant kind of changes that up where, like, instead of Hellish Rebuke, you get Burning Hands. And that's actually the variant D'Artagnan has, because Burning Hands is a very important part of my concept of D'Artagnan. He's going to be casting that as often as he can. And yeah, but for just the player's handbook, it's Thaumaturgy, Hellish Rebuke, and then the Darkness spell. They also get the inherent ability to speak infernal. So I guess if you find yourself speaking to devils in your campaign and you're a tiefling, well, good for you. Yeah. Other than that,
Hey, good job.
yeah. Other than that,
You found some demon or
yeah.
not.
You
not
found
demons,
a use
sorry.
for your weird
Yeah.
language, you know, because languages don't always come up, and choosing a language can be difficult sometimes. But you don't get a choice. You just know infernal.
Yeah, it's a little challenging to implement all like if you've got multiple if you've just got 3 characters, three PCs on the table with you, and they each know 4 languages. That's
Yeah.
really hard to implement.
Yeah. Well, languages grow on trees in this game, as far as I'm concerned.
That's
It's
what I mean.
ridiculous.
It's just
Like,
easy. Everybody knows common.
Yeah.
Just-
Everyone knows common, but
if
on
you-
top of that, like between a party of 5 people, like you got almost all your languages covered just on average.
Pretty much. Like I like the idea of having like 2 people in the party being able to like basically speak code in like,
Right.
oh, you speak
Right,
giant,
I
I
like
speak
that.
giant.
I like that.
Also, fuck that guy, and he
Yeah.
has no idea you said it.
Yeah, that's I see that happen very often.
Yeah,
in D&D
man.
games. It's funny. It's always funny.
I kind of wish it wasn't like that. Almost like there's so many languages, like,
There are.
and the D&D just hands them out. It's kind of
They
cool,
do.
but it like I guess I could probably be more creative as a DM to implement more of that.
Yeah, in previous editions of D&D, I like the way they did languages better because it was based off your intelligence score, which makes fucking sense.
Yeah.
And basically, you gained an extra language for every +1 of your intelligence modifier. So if you
okay.
had an 18 intelligence mod, you knew 4 extra languages. If you had a 10, you didn't know any extra
No,
languages.
yeah,
And that
you-
makes sense.
you know
Most
common.
people are, they're
average.
monolingual. And yeah, your average fighter with a 10 intelligence probably doesn't know 2 other languages unless it's 5th edition, where they
Yeah.
probably do. But I also like the idea of special exceptions of like, well, a ranger probably doesn't have a 12 intelligence, but they know the languages of their favorite enemies, which makes a lot of sense.
That's cool.
But
Rangers are cool.
yeah, rangers are cool. But that's the way it used to be done. But that isn't the way it's done anymore. And whatever. I love 5th edition, so I'm not really complaining too much. Another thing I want to talk about is and I think this is a unique bit of lore for the Tiefling, is because of their history and because of the way the world treats them and stuff like that, they have an interesting naming convention.
Okay.
Where tieflings will have like basically one of 3 kinds of names. They'll either kind of embrace that devilish nature, or like really, really be proud of their heritage and take a devilish name.
Okay.
Like Avernus or whatever, something from like the 9 Hells.
Yeah, they'll
And
embrace
something
it.
Very blatantly evil sounding.
Huh.
Others will try and distance themselves from their devilish heritage and just try and take it like a normal human name, nothing special, just Gilbert Johnson.
Gilbert Johnson.
And
I'm a tiefling.
I'm a tiefling
I sell
named
used
Gilbert.
cars.
Yeah, exactly. They're just like, they don't want anything to do with their infernal heritage.
I'm gonna roll
And
that
then
guy. We're
there's-
gonna roll Gilbert Johnson.
Yeah, I'd like to see him. I'd like to see him in the current campaign.
Would you like to buy this here horse? He's
Oh,
only got
jeez.
500 miles on him.
I don't even want to know what D'Artagnan's reaction to him is going to be.
Dude, I had a really funny idea to have a this is totally off topic, but a bartender be careful, this drink has 2 horsepower. And that's like your social conditioning kicks in. 2 horsepower, that's not a lot of horsepower, but it's an alcoholic beverage. It's worth 2 horses of power.
Okay, yeah, I get it. I like it.
Anyway,
Moving on from your 2 horsepower drink, the third naming convention is probably the most interesting one, the one that's unique to tieflings, and it's called their virtue name. Now, this comes from them wanting to distance themselves entirely from either their infernal heritage or their human side, and just kind of have a single word name that defines who they are.
And that name is light, like a wafer.
Well, light would be a virtue name, and maybe they're light like a wafer, but no, it is a single word name, like light, or like despair, or hope, or ambition, or
mercy.
Yeah, mercy is another one that you'd see better.
That's a cool
than
real
the other
life
ones.
name.
Yeah, it is. But yeah,
That's
so
interesting.
they choose a virtue name, which I think is cool, and you don't really see that in other races, and yeah, so that's just another bit of Tiefling lore. But before we wrap up this episode, is there any questions that you had about Tieflings?
No, I typically I like interacting with them. They make for very interesting role play with like the intimidation, charisma, like deception stuff. They can do a lot in a town, and depending basically like how buff you want to be in combat depends on the class you kind of pair up.
Yeah, and like any race, like Tieflings are better at some classes than others. They're very notable warlocks.
Yeah, obviously the intelligence and charisma boosts are gonna
Wizards.
complement. Yeah, dude,
A lot of
Tiefling
magic
bard
using.
sounds like
Yeah.
with the way I'm envisioning bards right now. It's just like I cannot envision Tiefling being one.
You see them a lot. Because you got to remember, like they look evil, but they're just people. So there's plenty of like happy-go-lucky Tieflings. Just you haven't seen one.
I think a more brooding bard that like kind of just like drags his feet and plays a violin.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I played a Tiefling bard once, and it was like nothing you've ever seen. It was like in a joke campaign. We were all playing evil characters, and
that's fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I had a Tiefling. His name was Bartimaeus S. Preston Esquire.
Bartimaeus, it's on the nose.
And he basically, okay, so he was a Tiefling bard who went to a bardic college and wasn't very good at what he did. And he was really, really ugly and just like socially awkward.
Okay.
And there, basically, he had a rival who was an Eladrin bard, who was a very beautiful man who played his lute, and the lady swooned and whatnot. And he was so jealous of this
a cool
dude.
kid.
He was a cool kid. He was so jealous of this dude that he offered his soul to Asmodeus to give him the power of rock and roll.
That's amazing.
And so Asmodeus made a pact with him. He was a multi-class bard warlock, and he basically had an arcane powered like electric guitar that he shred on. And he had a glamour cast upon him where he looked like a really like emo looking rock star, and it was a lot of fun.
Sick,
he was just a crazy party animal and a real selfish asshole.
That sounds pretty fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. But
got one life to live.
But yeah,
'Cause
so
after this, you sold your soul.
yeah, and actually that's a good point on the Tiefling that I'm currently running now. Is one thing that you as a DM probably should remember about D'Artagnan is like. When this life is over, his soul is consigned to the nine hells.
That's right.
He knows it. He's actually looking forward to it, but but yeah, like
climb that corporate ladder of the nine hells.
Exactly what he's planning on doing. He, as far as he's concerned, he's going to get there, and give him 10 years, he'll be running the joint.
I'm going to enrich my soul before I get there, so I can have a head start.
Exactly, that's D'Artagnan's plan. But
show up 5 minutes early.
But
don't leave your food in the break room.
Yeah, and he knows. He knows. He'll be the one enforcing those rules. Any more questions about Tieflings? Okay. So
I'm shaking my head no for the people that are just listening to this.
Yeah, he's saying no. So we're gonna wrap it up in just a minute here. I do want to say something about Tieflings. I'm gonna get a little serious here. This isn't something I would normally plan on doing at any other episode, but I was thinking about Tieflings the other day. I was thinking about the controversy of Tieflings, and I'm not gonna really harp on about the controversy because I feel like we've talked about that in quite a few episodes.
We do. We touch on it quite a bit.
Yeah, and I'm sure those who listen to us know how we feel about that. And you know what? In the end, everyone's game is their own. Like, and I absolutely agree with that statement. Like, so the way you run games, the way you run your game.
Sitting down at your table, run it the way you want it.
Mm-hmm. And but what I want to say was like Tieflings to me are a very personal race, and there's a reason that they're such a favored race of mine, and it's because like growing up, I had a very troubled childhood, and for those of you who may have had a similar childhood or a troubled childhood, and maybe for some of you don't, like sometimes you grow up feeling like there's something inside of you that is bad or wrong, or that things are your fault, or like you kind of carry something in you, like a darkness you feel, like especially in your teenage years when you're all broody and hormonal and whatnot. And for me, I wish that I had D&D when I was in my teenage years, because I think role play is such a therapeutic thing. I think there's a big reason that we all love this game so much. Like, we love it for the role play most of the time. Like, we could be playing a lot of different games that give us a lot of things that D&D gives us, but the one thing D&D gives us that no other games are really giving us is the real role play experience.
Yeah, you're enveloped in escapism.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that there's a reason that in therapies across the world that role play has such a part in like counseling and whatnot. I think it's important to think about the fact that actors pursue careers in what is essentially role play because of the creative outlet and sense of satisfaction that it brings them.
Definitely.
And then on top of that, I think that it's important to think about role play in childhood development. There's a reason that it's such a big part of our development as human beings that we play pretend and we play make believe.
Yeah, it's like almost second nature to do that.
It is
sort of thing.
It very much is, and I think it's very important to human emotional development and mental development. I think it's just important to us, and I view tieflings as a very physical representation of like that feeling I used to have when I was younger and confused and lost and felt very alone. And so for me, that's why tieflings are so important, and why I wouldn't be so quick to judge those who choose to run tieflings, because tieflings kind of have that trope for a reason.
Yeah, they embody those feelings that you can if you relate, you can embrace.
Exactly. And the tieflings I run now, they're not like that, and I certainly don't feel like that anymore. And it's been a long time, and I've grown up, and I'm very happy with my life now. But that being said, that was just a little spiel I want to say about tieflings, because they're one of my favorite race, and I just wanted to say why.
Cool, man. Well, I think we'll call it a game right there then.
Yeah, sounds good.
And thanks for listening again, and we will catch you next week. Congrats again to whoever won this Tales of the Yawning Portal contest. Really appreciate
winners.
you.
Both winners.
And to everybody who tweeted out about the show, thank you. That's the game. That's the game.
All right.
See ya.
Bye.